first story today is on an Interfax revelation that says that the Russian government was in touch with Donald Trump during his election campaign. Given that Donald Trump spoke highly of Putin during his campaign, the latest revelation is indeed intriguing. A top Russian official has confirmed that the Putin administration was in touch with Donald Trump's team throughout the election campaign. The comments by Sergei Ryabkov, Russia's deputy foreign minister, were swiftly denied, however, by Trump's office. But Ryabkov's comments could add fuel to the anger on the streets of the United States over Trump's election. The comments by Ryabkov will strengthen suspicions among U.S. national security that Kremlin was trying to influence the presidential election. Trump had earlier also indicated his backing for Russia's intervention in Syria and had good words for Vladimir Putin. Ryabkov said, and I quote, "Obviously, we know most of the people in his entourage. We have just begun to consider ways of building dialogue with the future Donald Trump administration and channels we will be using for those purposes." Now, just for our viewers who are just tuning in, a top Russian official has confirmed that the Putin administration was in touch with Donald Trump's team during the election campaign. The comments by Sergei Ryabkov, Russia's deputy foreign minister, were swiftly denied by Trump's office. But Ryabkov's comments could add fire to the anger on the streets of the United States over Trump's election. Now, the comments by Ryabkov will strengthen suspicions among U.S. national security that Kremlin was trying to influence the presidential election. Trump had earlier also indicated his backing for Russia's intervention in Syria and had good words for Vladimir. Just to break this down, Dmitry Peskov, the spokesperson for Vladimir Putin, had told the Associated Press in an interview that Russian experts were in contact with some members of President-elect Donald Trump. Now, what does this really indicate? Remember, there has been a talk about how the United States had accused Russia of actually trying to hack into the email systems of the Democratic Party. Also, how will this really impact ties between Russia and United States in the way forward? Does this really mean a closer collaboration when it comes to the fight against terror, the fight against the Islamic State? Now, these revelations are also intriguing given the fact that all throughout they have been denied, both by Donald Trump and also, we will play out for you in a while from now, the official version that's been coming in from the Russian side. Now, what the kind of allegations that have been coming in with regard to the kind of revelations, and what does this really mean for Russia and United States? The entire world, of course, has been closely monitoring the kind of allegations that have been made by United States of Russia trying to hack into the private email servers of the Democratic Party. Let's also, in fact, get in a look at what these developments really mean for the way forward. Why don't we also get in a word from our esteemed guest, Ajay Malhotra, joining us on the broadcast right now. Just to give us a perspective, sir, on what this, according to you, really means, coming at a time when there have been allegations rife about how there was an intention on part of Russia to actually hack into the private email servers of the Democratic Party. And then we have the spokesperson for Putin, Mr. Dmitry Peskov, actually trying to say that the Russian administration and Russian experts were in touch with the Donald Trump administration.
Well, I saw the comment that Deputy Foreign Minister Ryabkov has given, and he said that we know people who are on the team of Trump. He didn't say that we are in contact with them to do anything in particular. As far as I'm concerned, I think this is all going to pass in any case. President-elect Trump is very keen on improving relations with Russia, and so is Russia under President Putin keen on improving relations with a new Trump administration. So I think this will very soon become history because neither side would be keen on drawing attention to it beyond a point. If you look at the present stage of Russia-US relations, they are at their lowest point since the Cold War ended. That is over 25 years. And I think it's in the interest of both countries to move forward and try and improve them and bring them to a more normal setting.
Sir, in the way forward, what do these revelations, according to you, really mean? Does this mean closer collaboration between Russia and United States when it comes to fighting against the Islamic State, when it comes to the war against terror? Do you see a closer collaboration now between US and Russia, given that these revelations have come out in the open?
I have absolutely no doubt that USA will now try and work more closely with Russia in the fight against international terrorism, including, I feel, also against the IS in Syria. It is in the interest of both countries, and both leaders have it as a main focus for themselves and for their countries. So it makes good common sense for USA and Russia to combine their actions against international terrorist groupings. So I don't think that there would be much delay in moving in this direction. This would be the simplest and one of the early positive steps in foreign affairs that President-elect Trump could take after he is sworn in on 20th of January next year.
All right, so I request you to please stay on with us. Let's now take a closer look at what these revelations really talk about and what this really means for Russia and the United States. A complete report on the revelations. Have a look.
That there was no love lost between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump was evident. On the campaign trail, they differed on many issues: immigration, Obamacare, taxes, gun control, among other domestic issues. But if there was one foreign policy issue they sparred most on, it was Russia and Putin.
We have a country with tremendous numbers of nuclear warheads, 1,800, by the way, where they expanded and we didn't. 1,800 nuclear warheads, and she's playing chicken. Look, Putin, from everything I see, has no respect for this person.
Well, that's because he'd rather have a puppet as president of the United States.
No puppet.
And it's pretty clear.
You're the puppet.
It's pretty clear.
For his part, Trump made no bones about his admiration for Putin. He also questioned the utility of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. As for Clinton, her feud with Putin raised eyebrows, not least because it was Clinton, when she was a foreign minister, who presented her Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov with a symbolic reset button in 2009. The US-Russia relationship was all downhill since then. First, Putin accused Clinton of supporting protests against him in 2012 and for effecting regime change in the Arab world, sometimes with disastrous consequences, as became evident after the so-called Arab Spring. The US saw Putin as the villain for annexing Crimea from Ukraine and for coming to the aid of a beleaguered Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. What made matters worse between the US and Russia were allegations made by the Clinton campaign that Russia and Putin were behind the hacking of the Democrats' computers and interference in the American elections. But for the record, US investigations have found no evidence of Russian involvement. Trump's win would have come as a gift for the Kremlin. In fact, Putin was among the first world leaders to congratulate Trump. Putin said he hopes for, quote, constructive dialogue, unquote, with Trump. What has added an interesting twist to the discourse is a New York Times report published after Trump's win, which suggests that the Russian government had made contacts with Trump's campaign staff. The report cites Interfax, a private Russian news agency, as saying that there were contacts between some Trump aides and Russian representatives. But the Russian Foreign Ministry has clarified that its diplomats had contacted some senators and other political allies close to Trump, but not his campaign staff. As Trump gets ready to occupy the Oval Office in the White House, It remains to be seen how the US-Russia relations go from here. Ramesh Ramachandran, WION.
Mr. Malhotra is still with us. Sir, if you can also shed light on what, in your view, this chemistry between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin really means for the world.
Well, I think it is good news for the world and for India. In my view, relations between these two important countries coming down to such a low level is really in nobody's interest. And for India, we are looking at improved relations with the Americans. And we have always pointed out the convergence of interests we have and our desire to improve our relations with America. But equally, there's, our relations with the USA and Russia are not a zero-sum game. So if US-Russia relations improve, that is, I think, also very good for India. It will help us in achieving some of our foreign policy objectives. And I think even for US-Russia relations, the only way forward now is upwards. And with the two leaders, President Putin in situ and President-elect Trump soon taking up his post, I think you will find a quick improvement in US-Russia relations. I have heard very carefully the comment made about Deputy Foreign Minister Ryabkov. He is a good friend of mine and a thorough professional, and I can tell you that if he says he had contacts with some senators and not with the staff of President-elect Trump during the election campaign, I would tend to believe that. Equally, let me add that when you talk about monitoring, I doubt that the Russians would have tried to hack into anyone's system. But monitoring and intelligence gathering, all countries, all major countries do it. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Russians and the Americans and every other country of any importance is indulging in that.
Right, Mr. Malhotra, we've heard what Mr. Trump had to say, for example, vis-a-vis Russia, vis-a-vis Vladimir Putin throughout his election campaign. Did you see that as just another electoral rhetoric, or did you see that as an actual indicator of the bonhomie there?
I wouldn't say bonhomie as yet, but I don't think it is merely rhetoric, simply because there are advantages to be gained. And when he has spoken of what he intends doing, one is on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that he wants to step away from it. Now, let's not forget that under President Obama, they were not planning to invite Russia or China to join that partnership, or India for that matter. So there's a commonality of interests up there for Russia and USA. Secondly, when we talk about NATO, and President-elect Trump has said that he would like the NATO allies to contribute a greater portion of the finances for running that organization. That also shows kind of a stepping back a bit in the push that NATO has been giving for its eastward expansion at the moment. So I think there are some elements of that that can be worked upon by both the US and Russian leadership and move things in the right direction. And thirdly, I feel that on the issue of sanctions against Russia, there's scope for doing things together. If you see the forward movement through the Minsk I and Minsk II agreements on what to do on Ukraine has involved Germany, France, Ukraine and Russia, the Normandy Four, as they're known, but not USA, because it was found easier to move forward on these issues when you have the Europeans to themselves. So I feel now again up here, you might find that opportunities for a solution might be more forthcoming when Trump comes into the seat.
Right, please hold that thought, sir. Continue to stay on with us. We're also joined by journalist with the Moscow Times, Matthew Kupfer. Thank you very much, Matthew, for speaking with us and joining us on the broadcast. First up, what do you make of this latest revelation that the Russian government and Russian experts were in fact in touch with Donald Trump throughout the campaign?
Thank you for having me, first of all. I don't really make that much of it because essentially it's been denied both by the Trump campaign and by the Clinton campaign. It could be true, but it's not very clear to me. And Speaker Peskov, spokesperson Peskov said that that later he made it sound like that he was suggested that Ryabkov's comment was referring not so much to the Russian government, but to certain experts in Russia who were in touch with certain people in the circles of the Clinton, the Trump campaign. So it's very difficult to draw many clear conclusions from this, from my point of view. That said, I don't necessarily think that Donald Trump's election to the presidency will hail a great improvement in U.S.-Russia relations. The divisions between the U.S. and Russia are very much defined by rather divergent policy positions, for example, on the Ukraine crisis and on the Syria crisis. And Donald Trump is a really spectacularly inexperienced, extremely inexperienced candidate. And because of that, I think he hasn't articulated, I don't think this is very clear, he hasn't articulated many clear positions. And the things he has articulated, it's not entirely clear that he'll stick to them. He seems rather flexible. And I suspect he will be very dependent on his advisors. And we should remember that as a politician who became president, who ran for president from the Republican Party, he's now, whether or not he was a Republican before, he's now a Republican, and his advisors will come from that party. And this is a party that has been actually very hawkish on Russia for the most part, very supportive of arming Ukraine, and on the whole hasn't had recently that many wonderful things to say about Russia. If you look at some of the people being floated for cabinet positions in the Trump White House, for example, former Speaker of the House of Representatives Newt Gingrich, who could become the Secretary of State, he supported arming Ukraine in the past. John Bolton, a former U.S. ambassador to the UN, is a very hawkish character. And Senator Jeff Sessions of Alabama also isn't, I wouldn't call him a dove on Russia. So to some degree, I think the bigger question with Trump's attitudes towards Russia is that we really don't know what will happen. And I think that the Kremlin is also aware of this. You know, there was a lot of support for Trump coming out of Russia, but you have to ask where it came from. It came from the television news. It came from certain activist and ultra-patriotic circles related that were close to the Kremlin, but were not directly of the Kremlin necessarily.
Okay.
And these people were saying many positive things about Trump. Putin spoke positively of Trump, but fairly restrained, as is his style. He called him sort of flamboyant. He didn't call him brilliant. That was a mistranslation. And I think that probably within the Kremlin, while there are people who relate positively to Trump, I think there are probably a lot of people who are now saying, now what? Because if we really look at it, it seems almost certain that the Kremlin was betting on a Clinton victory. They may not love Clinton, but they expected that she would win, that she would be the next president.
Just stay on with us, Matthew. Why don't we also get in a word from the Deputy Head, Center for Asia and Middle East, Russian Institute for Strategic Studies, Mr. Boris Volkovsky is also joining us. Thank you very much for sparing your time and speaking with us, sir. First up, what do you make of this revelation that Russian experts were in fact in touch with Donald Trump throughout his campaign?
Well, I think it's just a very, reports that have no basis at all, because definitely the American campaign was American-owned and American-led, and so Trump has no need to address Russian pollsters, Russian political technologists to raise his ideas and to appeal to the public. I think it's the matter with the public, and probably it's a crisis of traditional political science and traditional political technologies, but definitely has nothing to do with outside interference.
Sir, but given the fact that these are statements emerging from the spokesperson of Mr. Putin, Mr. Dmitry Peskov has been noted as speaking to the Associated Press, talking about how Russian experts actually were in touch with Donald Trump. Are you calling those reports and those statements as absolutely inaccurate? And are you saying that those have absolutely no truth in those?
Well, you see, Russia, probably for the first time in history, Russia was one of the most important topics in this campaign, and definitely it was in the interest of the Democratic Party and Hillary Clinton as representing that clan to accuse anybody when she was losing. And actually, it was becoming more and more obvious that she was losing, and that all the WikiLeaks report suggested that she was she was doing some illegal things with her emails and so on. But there is definitely no basis for such accusations, and FBI, as far as I know, found no Russian trace in the hacking and all these accusations.
Right, Matthew Kupfer has also been listening in. Matthew, what do you make of what Mr. Boris has been saying all throughout, and also reports, conspiracy theories that Russian hackers had in fact hacked into the systems of the Democratic Party and that this may have benefited Trump? What is your take on that? Do you make of that as just a conspiracy theory, or do you think there's actually some truth in that?
Well, I'm not a computer programmer. Or a computer specialist, so it's very difficult for me to say what was going on there. I know the U.S. government says they believe these were Russian hackers or Russian-backed hackers. I tend to think they wouldn't make that accusation lightly. At the same time, these emails, this data from the hacks, it reached WikiLeaks. It was released. Was Russia involved in this? There are signs that seem to point to yes, but it's difficult to, I mean, the signs seem to point to yes, but it's difficult to say exactly how everything was connected, what the roles were. I think, though, it makes sense why Russia and some of its media was really on the offensive against Clinton. I think it very much makes sense in the context of the fact that they expected her to win. And there's an idea which I've heard floated both by American experts and also by Russian experts who were supportive of Donald Trump, which is that if the election is closer in the U.S., if Clinton didn't win by a landslide, and we should remember that most of the polling was suggesting she had a 70% or above chance of winning, right, for the election. If she doesn't win by a landslide, if it's very close, it means that there's a to some degree, weaker mandate. She doesn't have the support of the vast majority of the country, just a little bit more support than the other candidate. And because there were a lot of tensions in the country at the moment, Donald Trump, his campaign had stoked many tensions, racial tensions, immigration-related tensions, religious tensions. I think there was a belief that if things were closer, it would mean America would have to work on itself, work on fixing its own problems first, and this would mean that it would be less active in foreign policy. This idea has been floated both by American experts and Russian experts who should probably have a better idea of what was going on. So I think there's some truth
Matthew,
to that.
just hold that thought there. Why don't we also now get a word from Mr. Boris, who's also listening in. Mr. Boris, what do you make of the kind of accusation that this would in fact mean that the United States was in touch with Russia, the growing chemistry between Russia and the United States? You, of course, are saying that Russia, in fact, had no say, had no outside interference when it comes to the United States elections. But given the fact that these statements have come in from Mr. Putin's spokesperson's office, what do you make of these accusations that there was growing chemistry between Russia and the United States?
Well, you see, first of all, we'll have to wait and see. There is a certain similarity in Trump's statements made during the campaign and some statements by Russian President Vladimir Putin. Both said that they are looking basically and primarily into the national interest of their own countries. To my mind, what is the main difference between Trump and the previous several administrations, maybe all administrations after World War II, is that during this campaign, the real fight was between two concepts of America. America is a nation state, and America is a transnational corporation, as it used to be for several decades now. And if America is looking into its national interests, and would like to position itself as a very important, probably the strongest and the biggest state, and the most important state in the world, but just one of the states in the global community, then it has nothing there is no conflict between American national interest and Russian national interest. But if it continues, goes on, imposing itself on every possible little conflict wherever it happens on the globe, then definitely that was the main reason of this confrontation between and standoff between Russia and the United States in recent years.
Right, Matthew, one final question to you before we wrap this up. Does this really augur well for the world when it comes to a unified fight against terrorism, unified fight against ISIS? Do you see that really transpiring when Russia and the US actually have close-up on Homi?
I'm not sure that there is going to be an improvement in relations. As I said earlier, I think we really need to wait and see. My feeling is that the best bet for an improvement in relations that we can see at the moment is that perhaps if the Kremlin relates more positively, if the Russian government relates more positively to Trump, to President-elect Trump, then when he becomes the president, when he takes office, there will be an improvement in relations based upon a little bit, a honeymoon period at least, based upon some common good feelings. But I think we don't know what his policies will be. We don't know who his advisors will be. We don't know what he's planning to do. We don't know how well cooperation in a fight against terrorism against ISIS will work out in a pragmatic sense when they actually try to do it, not when they talk about goals, when they put it into practice. My feeling is that there are more questions here than answers. And if you talk with many of the Russian experts on relations with the United States, on America, you'll see that many of them are saying that this is really more questions than answers. This is not a sure thing. More
questions than answers, certainly. Matthew, request you just to hold that thought there. We're completely running out of time. One final remark from Mr. Malhotra before we close this. Mr. Malhotra, where do the relations between the US and Russia really go from here, according to you?
Well, relations have sunk to such a low level that I think they can either only go up gradually or at a faster pace. I agree with the previous speakers that much is unknown about who Trump's advisors are going to be, what would be the actual policies he would pursue beyond the broad general indications he's given. So we'll have to wait and see. But the direction, I would say, it can't possibly go any lower. It will certainly stay at least at this plateau, if not go up.
All right, Mr. Malhotra, Matthew, and Mr. Boris, thank you very much for joining us on Gravitas for this discussion. Of course, as you rightly pointed out, Mr. Malhotra, many questions and many answers still remain. Of course, a lot is still unknown on where relations between Russia and the US will really head and in what direction, and what would that really mean for the rest of the world as well as for India. On that note, it's a wrap on this segment of Gravitas. Stay tuned for the other discussion that we will take you further into the ramifications of the India-Japan nuclear deal. Stay with us.